Well, good afternoon, everyone. This is day 2 of your 10-day blood sugar program. So I'm going to kind of do a little back to school, for what I call back to school for patients, to give you a little kind of background stuff here. I will review supplements again, review foods in the program, and then what your macros are and what a low carbohydrate, high fat diet is, because that's what I'm going to have you ultimately switching to when we're done here. So remember that the blood sugar program supplement schedule is like this, and I did go ahead and make the change on there because most of you are doing the Veggie Pro, either chocolate or vanilla. It's 4 scoops per shake. The 4 scoops give you almost, I'd kind of do rounded scoops, so you'll probably get about 20 grams of protein in the shake. So that would give you a good 60 grams of protein in the day. So that's probably a good number. Then your SP cleanse still stays the same throughout the whole program. 5 cleanse in the morning, lunch and dinner, 5 Diaplex morning, lunch and dinner, 2 Gymnema in the morning, and then 1 in the afternoon and 1 for dinner. And then Annie, we talked about what to do for your hubby for the Diaplex. So there's nothing in there that will cause any contraindications with any medications, because these are all whole food based. The Gymnema is not, it is an herb, but there's no contraindications for any medications. So I'm really careful with that. All right, so here's your program list on page 15. Remember, it gives us our vegetable serving size. Half a cup is your target, 13 to 15 servings per day. If you want to do it all at once, awesome. If you want to split it up throughout the day, that's awesome too. Starchy vegetables, only half a cup. So if you think about why we would limit the starchy vegetables, you'd be correct in saying that it's because they're higher in carbohydrates. So we want to limit that to 1 per day. So have half a sweet potato one day, cook the whole thing, have half one day and have half the next day. Serving size on your fruit, remember it's a half a cup to 3/4 of a cup, and use it only in your shakes. And if you really are kind of on this goal to have some weight management, maybe lose a few pounds, I would cut the fruit down as much as possible, limit it to berries, blueberries, blackberries, strawberries, red raspberries. Your protein serving size is 3 ounces, and this is in addition to your protein for your shakes. So you can have 2 to 3 servings per day. Lean meat, make sure the eggs are free range. That means they're running around in Dr. Sunshine eating bugs like they're supposed to. We're not feeding them a bunch of grains like we talked about last week. Same thing with any kind of lean protein like beef. You want to make sure the cattle are being grass-fed, grass-finished. Otherwise, they feed them grass and then they fatten them up with grain, so you've defeated the whole purpose. And I think I've got a couple things in here that you can look at as far as, or I'll have them for next week where you can buy some of this stuff. Miscellaneous servings, your 2 teaspoons, 3 to 4 servings per day of your oils. So that'll give you enough fat in your diet, and helps with elimination, helps with coating the intestines and making things run nicely. Beverages, you can have filtered water, mineral water, spring water. I don't mind if you have this, the bubbly water or any of these flavored waters, as long as there's no sugar in them, and just be mindful of the contents of them. So that would be the next thing that I look at. You can have green tea, and yes, you can have coffee as long as you don't do any of your fancy creamers in there and a lot of sugar. So if you're using a sweetener like monk fruit or stevia or Truvia or one of the sugar alcohols, I'm okay with that. If you want to do a decaf, then I would do definitely a Swiss water decaf and green tea. Green tea is definitely a little bit of caffeine in there, but it is really high in antioxidants, and that's really important to protect us from cancer. So this kind of gives you a little overview of everything, and you already have that in your book, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on that because I have other things I'd really like to talk about. If you have any questions about these, just put it in the chat box and we'll address it at the end. All right, so this is what your plate should look like. A lot of veggies, which would be the green, and the protein, moderate, and then your miscellaneous will be everything else. Remember, we're kind of keeping you away from a lot of the carbohydrates because your bodies are kind of addicted to them. Well, we know some of you are, maybe not all of you, but there is always an underlying addiction to any kind of carbohydrates, especially sugar. The more refined, the more the addiction. All right, so let's talk about macros. So we hear that word, we hear macros, we hear micros. Well, what are macros? So macros is a short name for macronutrients. Micro is micronutrients. When we talk about micronutrients, we're talking about trace minerals, trace being the key word there. We don't need a lot of them, but all those minerals like copper and zinc, all those feed our endocrine system, so they're super important. But our macros are our carbohydrates, our fats, and our proteins. So that's those three components that make up our macronutrients. So when you hear people flashing the word around macros, now you can be cool too because you know what they are. And you're like, well, I adjusted my macros today. So that's one way to sound cool in this world. So let's talk about carbohydrates. We have two types. We have a complex and a simple. 1 gram of carbohydrate equals 4 calories. So that's energy food, it's starch and sugar, it's the least expensive, plentiful and available, easily digested, and widely distributed in plant food. And this is, if you look at the way the chemical bond, the bond is here for a carbohydrate, it's big and bulky in the chain of things. So if you're going to eat this, especially eat a carbohydrate at night before you go to bed, you have this big bulky chain in your stomach, and the body's like, no way you're not going to go run right now, so what am I going to do with this? So it decides to break it down into nice, neat little packages we call fat, and we know where that's placed. So that's why we want to limit the carbohydrates. Now, I do a lot of cycling. I'll do up to 200 to 300 miles a week. And I still do very little carbs because I want my body to use the fat for the fuel. And we'll kind of get into that as we go along here today. So macronutrients, this is kind of a simple guide. If you can look at, you can see how the carbohydrates and the proteins overlap and the proteins and the fats overlap. And so that you can have these together and you can have these together, but you don't want to have this and this together. So keep that in mind as we go. So a complex carbohydrate are going to be your foods that are nutrient rich and fiber dense. And, I do have some pasta on there, but that's a whole grain pasta. I still personally don't do it. We use something called palmini. It's heart of palm, and they come in angel hair pasta, linguine, sheets for lasagna, which we're going to experiment with. It's a new product to me. One of my patients turned us on to it, but it's palmini. And you can get it at Publix, and it's in the vegetable section where the cans are. You can order it on Amazon too, but give that a try. We did a fruta de mar with a red sauce and it was fabulous. So we are actually going to do a keto style lasagna because it's only 4 grams of sugar in that as opposed to your 35 to 46 grams of carbohydrates in your pastas and rices. So a simple refined carbohydrate is, it's exactly what it means being simple. It burns super quick. It burns very simply. And that's your refined sugar and flours. So that's all the foods that you should be eating right now. We want to kind of break you away from that. We've got Valentine's Day coming up. So we'll talk about that next week to prepare you for that, because I don't want you going off this program and then just falling off the wagon altogether. But I promise you, you'll feel good. So you'll want to maintain for a little bit, and I'll give you some strategies, some health strategies at the end so that you can kind of carry this on. Most people stay pretty close to it. I mean, you'll make some things that you think you should have that you miss having, you'll have them and they won't taste as good. Promise. But your brain only needs 20 grams of carbohydrates per day to function normally. The average American consumes 295 grams of carbohydrates. So you can see the difference in that. If you subtract 20 from the 295, that's 275 grams of carbohydrates that you're not using. Now, if you're Michael Phelps and you're swimming, so many 8 hours a day, that's a different story. But if you're sitting at your desk and maybe have a stand-up desk, you're not going to even utilize all that. And so, as we talked about earlier, big and bulky on the chain of things gets broken down into nice, neat packages we call fat. So carbohydrates per day, so that equals almost 1,100, almost 1,200 calories if we do that many grams of carbohydrates a day. We take that number, 295, multiply it by 4, and that gives us the 1,180 calories. So your brain is affected with all of this, and your liver, if you don't have enough carbohydrates, your liver will actually make it in the form of ketones. But the liver is very fascinating because it can make sugar and break sugar. It can make fat. It can break fat. So it's got a lot of really powerful things that the liver does. So then when we talk about fats, there are 3 types. We have saturated and unsaturated, and we have trans fats. 1 gram of fat equals 9 calories. It's also an energy food. It supports cell growth. It protects your organs. It keeps you warm, which we don't really need in Florida, maybe tomorrow morning and the next morning, but generally wear a jacket. Helps absorb nutrients and helps produce very important hormones. And we actually call fat a hormone. And it's actually part of the endocrine system. And if you look to the left here, you'll see saturated fats. And you'll see unsaturated fats, which are vegetable oils, which are technically seed oils. And I talked to my other class about this, and I may throw a little of that in next week just so you get some clarity on that. And then we have trans fats. So saturated fats are very stable. So you can see how the chain is. It's very stable. Unsaturated fats are unstable, and they kind of move around a little bit. And those are usually done because they're found in vegetable oils. Trans fats are any kind of oil like soybean oil or corn oil or anything we call a vegetable oil is really a seed oil. And they have to be processed at high heats, and they have to be broken down so they can be stored, and then they last long on the shelf. That's why all your baked goods in the store are made with trans fats, because they last long. But for you, we want to make sure that we stay more saturated and unsaturated. And the reason being is our body temperature is 98.6. These oils here, you can boil them at 400 degrees. Well, our body temperature is never going to get that high to boil or to get rid of, to burn those fats. So if we stay with the saturated fats, our body can burn those easily. The unsaturated fats, our body can burn easily because they're not high temperatures. Like olive oil, you don't want to take it to a high temperature. Coconut oil, you don't want to take it to a super high temperature because you damage the oil. But trans fats are designed to be, they make them with hexane gas, so they're really strong and powerful, and they last a long time, but our bodies can never get rid of them. So if you think about like cellulite, women, we have a little bit of a trouble with that. And I will tell you, the 21 day is a masterful at helping to eliminate cellulite. But cellulite is how the fat kind of builds up in pockets in our thighs, back of our arms, and around our stomach. And those are the trans fats that we ate in the past. You can get rid of them. It just takes a little bit of time and patience and good eating, and not a lot of white wine, Annie. So saturated fat examples are here. So they're usually solid at room temperature. They're usually animal foods. They contain saturated fatty acids, and they're more fatty acids than they do the unsaturated. Examples are meat, poultry, your eggs, egg yolks, your whole milks, your cheeses, ice cream, not right now, butter, coconut, and palm oils. Your unsaturated fats are your nuts and your seeds and your avocados, sesame seeds. A little bit of salmon kind of falls under that unsaturated just because it's salmon. And then our trans fat examples, well, it may look good to you now, but trust me, after we're done with this, you'll take a whole different perspective on carbohydrates. This is what makes America sick. This is what propagates cancer. This is what propagates chronic disease. So if you would eat a McDonald's Whopper, I don't even know. I've never eaten at McDonald's or Burger King. I know that sounds weird, but I've never eaten there, so I'm not sure which sandwich is where. But if you would just eat one of those sandwiches a day, if you eat one sandwich and you had a heart attack, you'd understand that it was the sandwich that caused that heart attack. But it takes a lot of insult over a period of time for that to happen. So, then people have a heart attack and they'll blame it on, oh, well, they're taking some supplement and the supplement caused it. But they don't take into consideration they eat a Whopper or a Big Mac every day for their whole entire life. So protein is the next macro. There are two types, plant-based and animal-based. 1 gram of protein equals 4 calories. And I'm going to give you some homework before we go here. So let me make sure I write that down. So while you have a piece of paper, or just jot this down. So I'm going to do it again so I can remind you at the end. Fed Up is a movie. It's on YouTube. And you'll have some commercials in there. Just ignore the commercials, and they'll go away in a few seconds. But the movie Fed Up, I want you to watch that. You have this weekend, because there's no football on this weekend, so you have plenty of time to do that. It'll be cold outside. Curl up by the fireplace. No, I'm just kidding. But no glasses of wine, Annie. Okay. Did I say that enough, Annie? Sorry. When we talk about proteins, we're talking about both plant-based and animal-based, and it's an amino acid structure. It builds and repairs tissue. It makes enzymes and hormones. They're the building block of your bones, builds muscle, cartilage, skin, and blood, and also is a component of every cell. So the important thing for my female patients, and even if you're an athlete, I always recommend to eat your proteins earlier in the day. Unfortunately, our metabolisms are just a little bit slower than men's. We hate them for that, but it's the truth. So I like for you to eat your protein a little bit earlier in the day. That way your body has time to process it. It gets broken down into these amino acid structures. That way your body can utilize it to repair your body. Otherwise, you eat it late and your body's like, do I repair or do I digest? We want it already digested and ready for action. So protein is also for calories, and that's important to remember. The carbohydrates and protein are both 4 calories. As far as plant-based and animal-based, here's your picture. You can tell which ones are from the plant, which ones are from the animal. Personally, and I'll throw another movie out there, Game Changers, which talks about being vegan, which I agree with a lot of it, but not everything on there. Game Changers talks about being vegan, and they take athletes and they, show them the difference in their performance and a lot of different blood tests and other tests that they do. So for my personal diet, I do about 75 to 80% plant-based protein in the form of the Veggie Pro Shake that you guys are using right now. Because it's sweetened with monk fruit, it doesn't raise up my glycemic index. And I limit my animal protein to eggs, chicken and fish, and maybe red meat once a month, but more as served as a condiment, like on the side, and more veggies. And if I do that, I'm going to do it earlier in the day. So just be aware that I'm not a super big vegan person, because there are essential amino acids we need, which we'll talk about. And here's the amino acids we need. There's 9 essential amino acids in the red circle here. We don't make these, and the only place we can get them from is animal protein. So, if you have a bite of something a week, you're golden. If you're completely vegan, on the days I do vegan days, I use something called protofood, which are those 9 amino acids that we need. And they're essential. We just don't make them. The non-essential we make, and they're synthesized from the body. The other ones are obtained through nutrition. These are the building blocks of your proteins. So here's your common sources of protein. I put this in here so you can kind of get an eyeball of what food looks like when you go out to a restaurant. So, because I know you're not going to take a scale and measure everything. So this gives you a little idea. So 3 ounces of any lean chicken, turkey, or beef or fish is about the size of a deck of cards. 1 egg is 1 egg. Cheese or anything in a cup, 1 ounce is about your index finger. Tofu is 1/4 of a cup. Low fat milk or soy or yogurt is 1 cup. Peas, beans, or lentils, 1/2 a cup or 1/2 a baseball. Peanut butter is 2 thumb tips, and just pray you have big hands so you can get more. And then nuts or seeds, 1/4 of a cup. So you can see the grams of protein comparatively over here on the right side, that your animal protein is going to give you more bang for your buck, whereas the shake, you're going to take 4 scoops to get 20 grams of protein. But I guarantee you that I've been doing this for probably 3 or 4 years since I started competing at the level that I compete at with the old girls, which are faster than all the young girls. And it's really made a great difference in not only my performance, but just my body. And I will offer this to you. I know that it's a little bit difficult. If we maybe need to make a road trip or a staff meeting and then have food after, I'd like for you to, I will offer this to you at no charge. I have a scale called an InBody, and it's a very, you can talk to Susan about it. I think she's got the paperwork on it. But it measures everything, and it'll really give you a good idea of what kind of body fat you have, what kind of muscle you're carrying, where you're carrying it, and measuring your visceral fat as well. I only have that scale in Eustis. You have to get your passport out to come up there, but it's very, very helpful information. Especially, it would be a good time to do it after you finish this, and that'll give you. Then we can talk about some strategies you can do to decrease your body fat and improve your muscle. So I'll offer that to you. That's called the InBody 570. It's on my website. I'll send you a link. Let me write that down real quick. Link for InBody. And it's a very expensive scale. It's $10,000. That's why I only have one, but it's a hospital grade. So it gives some very, very accurate information. I use it for my virtual patients. They don't live here. I find where there's a scale and I send them to do that. So we usually charge $50 to come in and get on the scale and then get some discussion afterwards. So what should your macros look like? So let's kind of delve into that. Don't be so concerned about it right now, but more after we finish the program. This is how I'm going to shift you. So your recommended macros for your day will be carbohydrates 100 grams or less. So when you look at a label, then when it says carbohydrates on there, if it says 45 carbohydrates, that's half your carbohydrates for the day. Head of broccoli, 6 carbohydrates, an apple, 20 carbohydrates. So if I'm going to eat an apple, I've taken, a good portion of, at least almost a quarter of my carbs away for the day. So I would rather have it in the vegetables rather than the fruit, because then you get more bulk, more fiber, Not that you can't have the fruit, but just calculate it into your macros. Your protein should be half your desired weight in grams. So for me, I have it down here. I'm at 130 pounds, so I do half my body weight is 65 grams. I do 55 to 65 grams. And then your fat is your desired body weight in grams. We don't want to do it at the body weight you're currently at if you're not at a body weight you want to be, because we don't want to support that. We want to make sure we're supporting the weight you want to be. So if you look down below my example, I'm 130 pounds. So I eat 50 to 75 carbs a day. So I go a little bit under the radar there. I'm just being gentle to you to get you used to this, to give you under 100 grams. Remember, your brain only needs 20, and if you don't have it, your liver will make it for you, and then in the form of ketones. Protein between 55 and 65 grams, and fat grams of 130. That's 1170. So that gives me a total of between 15 to 1700 calories a day, which is, well, that's I need probably 12 to 1300 just for just managing when you're resting. So have to make sure you're doing activity to support that as well. If you're just sitting all day, you're not going to burn enough calories to be able to utilize that. So energy balance. I saw the scales. I had to do it. I just took advantage of the logo. Okay. So the number of calories taken in the body as food versus number of calories expended. So we're talking about a neutral balance, calories in equals expenditure, then you maintain your weight. If you eat more calories than you expend, then you're going to put weight on. If you eat more, if you eat more, did I say that more calories expended? If you eat more calories than you expend, then you'll put weight on. If you take more calories but expend more, then you lose weight. So, and there's a lot of controversy with that. And this is kind of a global. So, but I find that really getting with the macros and watching not necessarily worry. I don't really count calories, and even on the 10-day, you shouldn't be counting calories, because it's not about the calorie. It's about the type of food that you're eating. And that's why in the blood sugar, 10-day blood sugar program, you don't see a lot of rice or pasta or anything like that. You have veggies, a little bit of starchy stuff, some lentils and beans, and maybe quinoa, but the rest of it is a lean protein and good fat. So if you kind of look at this, is what we call an energy equation. So you can look at the apple, and if you look at the kind of pinkish purple here, that's protein and fat, and the rest is carbohydrates, and then other. So that would be fiber. So your grilled salmon is a lot of protein with a lot of fat, which we need fat. It's not the fat. If you don't learn one thing in these 3 classes I'm teaching you, this is the one thing I do want you to learn. It's not the fat that makes you fat. It's the sugar that makes you fat. Okay, so please keep that in your heads there. So then if you look at white bread, it has a little bit of protein, a little bit of fat, and a lot of carbohydrates. So you can see why bread is going to be bad. But the apple has a little bit of fiber in that, so that makes it a little bit better. So we have a thermic effect, meaning that we actually burn calories from eating. And so for like women down here, you can see your age and how many calories you just burn. You can see that as we age, we don't need as much food. Sorry to ruin that. And when we're younger, especially males and females, when we're in their reproductive ages, we need those calories to support our bodies. As we get older and those things start to shut down a little bit, we don't need as many. I mean, I don't eat as much. I eat a little bit more because of my activity, but I don't get as hungry, and I don't need as much sleep. So we talk about glycemic index. You've heard me say that a couple times. So when we talk about berries and a banana, so a banana is going to have a lot more glycemic effect, which is sugar effect on our body, than a berry. Even though the berries do have carbohydrates in them, they are lower, they've got more fiber to them, so that lowers the glycemic index. So a fruit that has more fiber to it is going to have a lower glycemic index. So banana doesn't really have a lot of fiber to it unless you eat the little strings and the peel too. Well, I wouldn't recommend that. But your blueberries are really great. The polyphenols in the skin are excellent antioxidants, so that's really helpful. So you can look at the low glycemic index meal, and we also talked about our shake that you're using on the Veggie Pro. It's sweetened with monk fruit, so the glycemic hit is almost negligible. And that's what we want. We don't want anything spiking our insulin. I'm trying to get your insulin to be regulated again, because you've done a good job at, kind of destroying that. So you can see your low GI meal here, glycemic index meal, spinach, tomato, egg whites. I do the whole egg, low fat cheese, grapefruit, apples. So you can see the difference. But, I'll have my patients say, well, I'm doing oats because they're heart healthy. Well, that's a whole different story, but it's still carbohydrates. And then we put some milk on there or half and half or something like that. So it's a little bit better than if you do steel cut oats. But still, if you're adding fructose or some type of sweetener like sugar to it, then you're throwing that off. But if you look at a high glycemic index, that's your instant oatmeal because it's been so processed. And you're adding an artificial sweetener like dextrose or saccharin. And I sent you the list of 61 sugars, names for sugar. So these are kind of the secret names in there. And then you're putting the milk on there, which milk sugar is lactose. But if you're doing organic whipping cream, there are no carbohydrates in that. If you're doing real butter, there are no carbohydrates in that. If they feed the cows or the chickens grains, it will have a carbohydrate effect. You are what they ate. So you're eating what they ate. So this is a food pyramid that we had pounded into our heads forever and ever, and it's just not accurate. And when you delve into why the food pyramid is like that, it was the agriculture and the FDA, because they were, the farmers, wanted to be propagated in there. But we know now that carbohydrates are just really damaging to the body. I mean, we talked about that with the class. So we're going to rearrange that for you here. So I thought we'd do this one for, because Valentine's Day is coming up. So this is your chocolate food pyramid. I'm just kidding. This is just a joke. I'm going to give you the real one now. So this is the one I like in the middle here. Stop buying junk food. If you're fat, try to eat less and exercise. But you can see the different realms over the different years, how they are still, but even in 2011, you still see that they have grains as a big portion and they have fruits as a big portion and little portions of vegetables and proteins, where we really should have a bigger protein, a bigger thing of vegetables and more good fats. So this is all propagated by, FDA and the Department of Agriculture, because they were trying to get people to eat healthier. But it also supports the people that grow the grains and the people that raise the cattle and have the milk. So we want to look more like this. This is more of what I like for a food pyramid. Drinking lots of water. Your veggies come first, your meat and fish come second, your little bit of fruit, your nuts and your oils, and your spices. This is a more healthy approach. So as far as diet, and to me, a diet is anything you put in your mouth. When we talk about, going on a diet, people always, think of that. Everything you eat, everything you put in your mouth every day is your diet. So we all diet, but, we reference diet as into losing weight. I like my little cartoon here. I lost 60 pounds on the Swiss cheese diet. We have all these kind of fad diets out there. We have Weight Watchers, which has reconstructed their program. Still, they tell you, okay, you can have these points, but they're not really encouraging you as much as they should to eat whole foods. And that's why I want us to get back to eating whole foods, because that's really, in the long run, cheaper for us. We don't need as much food because you're eating foods that are nutrition rich and fiber dense. So diets, there's no one size fits all in a nutrition program. That's why I showed you your macros, and you can calculate them for yourself. You want to choose a diet that optimizes your needs. Quality of the food is very, very important. You want to eat local and organic. If you're eating something they've shipped in from Chile or wherever, another state, then it has to be on the truck for however many days. So you're losing some of the value of the nutrition in it. So try to find local. We have, in Florida, we're so lucky. I use a living tower. So I grow all my own lettuces and Swiss chard and all my, cilantro and basil and all that stuff. And I even grow tomatoes on it. So then I always have salad. So I can go out there and make a salad out of the tower. A living tower is what it's called. You can look that up. So we want to reduce and remove your refined, over-processed, low nutrient foods, because those are where all the carbohydrates are. And they're the cheap foods, unfortunately. Proper hydration is also key for healthy living and overall health. Your muscles are 75% water. That's a lot of water. So talking about muscles, let's talk about exercise. So a regular exercise habit is necessary. We sit way too much. You need to have 3.5 hours of exercise minimum per week. That's 30 minutes a day. I recommend doing something every day, because if you're only doing something 3 days a week and you miss one of those days, then you've not done something for 5 days a week. So alternate it. Maybe one day do cardio, one day do strength. You've got to do both. Strength training, remember, is like paying off your mortgage. Once you pay off your mortgage, you just maintain. But cardio is like paying off your credit card. You just keep paying it off. You pay it next month, you pay it off, you pay it off, pay it off. And you'll always will have to do that. So cardio is required a little bit more frequently. But once you build a good muscle structure, I mean, I spend maybe 30, 40 minutes at the most in the gym, and that's all I do is just strength training. So regular habit, invest in instruction. So if you don't know how to do it, hire a trainer. I know you guys are getting ready to start a program of exercise with the practice. So that's awesome. But you want to have somebody that can teach you how to strengthen and protect your joints at the same time, especially as we age. Certain exercises are better for some, and we want to make sure we get some good spine strengthening and core strengthening, especially if we're sitting all day. So engage in a professional trainer, take a class. There's a lot of classes on, you can go on YouTube and pick up any kind of class. Exercise is a miracle drug. Take it often. You'll live a longer, healthier life, lower medical costs, better sleep, more productive work days. Mark will be happy about that. Mood enhancement. Mark will be happy about that. Decreased risk of almost any chronic disease. It works for everyone. There are fewer to no side effects. Every dose is 100% effective, even small ones, and it's more powerful and the most powerful and readily available drug, and it's free. So, I mean, you can go walk on your lunch hour, and you can do stuff in the morning at home. You can swim. You can get on a stationary bike. You can do a elliptical trainer. Whatever it is you like to do that. If you don't like to, if you like to dance, I'm using a virtual reality headset right now because with my hand injury, I can't. It's hard for me to do some of the stuff at the gym. So I'm boxing. It's amazing. So if you've not tried any virtual reality, it's cool. Oculus Quest 2. So they have a boxing VR. It's called VR Fit, and it's boxing and dance. I'm not a dancer, but the boxing is amazing. So let's talk about a ketogenic diet, because this is what we're going to transition to. We're going to work to get all that sugar cravings out of your system right now, and then I want to kind of push you to that. So it doesn't mean you're going to go into ketosis. So that's a misnomer. We're going to do a ketogenic type diet. I call myself a ketotarian because I do mostly plant-based protein rather than animal, but it's more fat than anything. So let's talk about how that works. So you can have real butter. I mean, that just butter makes everything taste well. And because you're doing whole food based foods, then you don't have to, you can add salt to it, you can add butter to it, because if you're buying something in a package, the sodium is just through the roof, because that's what gives it the taste, because they've overprocessed it so much. That's why they put sugar and salt and stuff, because they've overprocessed it and taken all the nutrition out of it. So ketogenic diet has very similar outcomes to caloric restriction, but caloric restriction only works if you had a really super bad diet. You'd lose initial weight, then you'll stop losing weight. And intermittent fasting, and we'll talk about both of those. So metformin is what people use that are diabetic, because they've eaten too many carbohydrates and their bodies have become insulin resistant. So it will slow the process we call glycation, but so does a ketogenic diet. And glycation means we have, like, if you cook meat too long, you get what we call advanced glycation end products, AGE. And it's interesting that AGE also tells us that ages our skin and ages our organs from that sugar. So glucose combines with proteins and other important molecules, and they kind of gum up your normal workings. And that's what glycation does. So they were saying that people that take metformin, this happens to them less, but there's so many side effects with metformin. I just choose not to use the metformin. So ketosis also lowers your blood sugar. Even on type 1 diabetics, we don't go into ketosis. That's 20 grams of ketones a day, and you have to measure that. We're not going to do that. We're going to just work on getting 100 grams of carbohydrates in a day. So your ketogenic diet, it's a low carb diet, high fat diet, offers so many health benefits. The original ketogenic diet was designed for children with epilepsy, and they found that this worked really well. It's also really good for inflammation, because most of your inflammation comes from sugar. So for me, I don't wake up with any stiff joints or sore joints or anything like that for as much as I work out and do the things that I do. So studies show that this type of diet can also help you lose weight and improve your health, and who doesn't want that? So ketogenic diets may have benefits like against diabetes, cancer, epilepsy, and Alzheimer's. And remember, we call Alzheimer's now type 3 diabetes. That's all the research coming out, that people that are more prone to Alzheimer's have had a high sugar diet. So if you have a family member that has dementia or some Alzheimer effects, even Parkinson's, you're susceptible to that, but you can change your genes by changing your diet. And if you do that now, the sooner the better. So you're going to drastically reduce your carbohydrate intake, and you're going to replace it with fat. Fat keeps you satiated, so you don't get hungry. This reduction in carbs puts your body into a metabolic state we call ketosis. And you're not going to go directly into ketosis. You'll be in a keto-like state, but I promise you'll still lose weight. Your body becomes incredibly efficient at burning fat for energy, and turning off the fat into ketones happens in the liver, and that supplies the energy for your brain. So you remember the movie Rocky, how Sylvester Stallone had that punch drunk look? That's because he didn't do any carbohydrates. And so it just slowed his talking and his brain way down. So we don't really want to go there. And 100 grams is really easy to manage. And then if you feel good at 100, you can try maybe one day a week, do 75, and then do 100 the rest of the week. So these diets have massive reductions in blood sugar and insulin levels. So you really don't need metformin. I can't tell you how many patients that I've worked with that were type 2 diabetic that we actually got them off their diabetic medication. And if they're also at that level, they're also hypertensive. So we can get them off their hypertensive medication and their metformin. So my goal is not to have you have metformin at all, because metformin really is not fixing anything. It's just putting a piece of tape over the symptom. So we have different types of ketogenic diets. The standard is 20 to 50 grams, but I would say that the cyclical, this would work the best for most people. Most of my patients, it works super well. Eat low carb for several days, and then maybe eat a little higher carb, not that 295 carbs, but a lower carbohydrate for a couple of days, and then your average carbohydrates for the next couple of days. That's what kind of what I do. I alternate things. I call it the Basudin confusion principle. I never do the same thing 2 days in a row, because I find that my body we're so adaptive, and the body kind of gets stuck in there, and then I just change it up all the time. So the body's like, okay, what's she doing now? And it works really well. So ketogenic specifics. So ketogenic diet, standard diet is very low carb, moderate protein, high fat. Typically, so that what I set up for you in macros is this: 75% fat, 20% protein, and about 5% carbs. Actually, I gave you a little bit more carbs on that to start with, but as you work along the program, you'll see that it'll be easier. So you're going to eat less protein. So I gave you your macros for your protein. Unless you're doing some exercise, but still I would stay more plant-based than animal-based. Eat more fat, so avocados, egg yolks, homemade mayo, and mayo is oil and eggs. Make sure you're using a good quality oil. Homemade dressings, olives, heavy organic whipping cream, grass-fed butter on vegetables. And whenever I do cook a steak, I always put real butter on it when I cook it, and I do cook it on the grill, not with charcoal, but with a gas. The charcoal is carcinogenic. Cutting the carbs here. You don't usually get into ketosis unless you eat in that between that 30 and 50 net carbs. So I just say, if you're going to do this, stay more at that 100 grams to start with. And if you feel like you can go a little less, then do so. And then don't be, too upset about your fat being so high, because it's 9 calories per gram. So it's not like you're eating a whole stick of butter every meal. It all works out. I don't measure anything except for my carbohydrates, and it all works out. So when we look at, let me just move this out of my way here. So when we generally, this makes us eat more intuitively. So when you try to sit down and pay attention to the flavor of the food, so that's kind of what we do at home. We sit down, we eat not in front of the TV. We sit at either our bar in our kitchen or at our dining room table. We pay attention to the food we make, who brought it to us, where we got it from, the local farmers that spend their passionate time creating that, growing that food. So that's super important. And, if it takes me 30 minutes to make something, I don't want to eat it in 5. How many of you sit down and eat and you're like, oh my gosh, my food's gone already? Or you're washing it down with water as you eat. I mean, go to a restaurant and this is all you see: people with cell phones, eating and drinking and not even being conscious of what they're doing. Relax and sleep are super important. Part of losing weight is balancing your hormones, and that includes cortisol, leptin, and ghrelin. And leptin and ghrelin have to do with your insulin and with your pancreas. but cortisol has to do with your adrenals. And I know we talked about that when I did that first class with you, that intro class a couple weeks ago, but the cortisol is what really keeps us awake at night. It should be dumping in the morning. So make sure you get your sleep, and that's getting a good sleep pattern, trying to go to bed at the same time every night. Not doing too much screen time. You know, I don't do anything on the computer at least an hour and a half before I go to bed. I may watch TV, but our TV's in the living room. We don't have cell phones. Cell phones are plugged in on a charging station away from our bodies because of the EMFs. It's a whole different topic. And just give it time. It takes a couple weeks for this high fat, low carb eating to kind of kick in. And here's some links here: Keto Clarity, dietdoctor.com, drbird.com. I'll send you some links for that. I'll send them to Dominique and she can send you, so you can kind of look at those. And plain old Dr. Google. I mean, there's plenty of information on keto styles of eating. I just try to keep it clear for patients so that there's so much information out there. So if you have a question, you have my email, please reach out to me. So this is kind of a low carb grocery list. I mean, you're just not buying junk food. So basically when you go to the grocery store, you're shopping that outer ring. If you're going up and down the aisles, then you're going to be in trouble. So I'm personally not allowed to go to the grocery store because my wife hates to see me respond to patients. I mean, respond to people, because if I see them doing something wrong, I'm a see something, say something kind of girl. Or my patients, I love this. My patients will be, you'll see my patients walking down the aisle, they'll see me and they're like, oh, they don't want me to see what's in their basket. And then when I see what's in their basket, I'm like, oh, I don't do that. I don't do that very often. I'm like, sure. So that gives you a good support. And when if we're going into ketosis, I'll support you with some other things, but definitely the Veggie Pro is really a great thing. Beta food is also good. Organically bound minerals are also helpful, and those support your kidneys and just your general health of your body. So I'd like to say I'm not old. I've just been young for a very long time. And, the older you get, the more true this is. So those who think they have no time for healthy eating will sooner or later have to find time for illness. Our whole goal with this is actually longevity, is healthy aging. If you age healthily, that means that you can live to be 70, 80, 90, and then you die. I don't want you being 60 and then living 20 or 30 years of chronic disease. We see that happen too much. We have a disease care system. We don't even have a health care system. You can't get fixed until you're broken. My goal is to keep you from breaking. And that's why I'm so passionate about it. I see what it's done for my family. I see what it's done for my personal self. I see what it does for my patients. That's why I'm so passionate about it. So finale will be next Thursday, 3/15. That's February 4th. I know you start your exercise program, I believe, on the 2nd, that Tuesday. So it'll be the same time, same station, and I will send the link out on right before the class then. All right.